I do not actually use this function much, but a lot of people do. You can take any of these functions. See how it's got that little C by the side? It's now in the custom menu. So if you've got functions that you use all the time, you don't have to drill down into the menu. You can put it on the custom menu. Most radios that do this kind of stuff are $800 or $900 bare minimum. This is the only radio with 9-point curves, complete glider mixing, complete helicopter functions. Does anybody fly helicopters? Okay. I don't want to do this with Larry's radio. We'll fiddle with mine. Okay, now we're in a helicopter setup. I can switch it back and forth, by the way, if I want to have it be a glider or whatever, but some of them are already there. I can now tell it what swash I want, and it gives you a picture of kind of where these positions are going to be. Pretty much no matter what swash mix, no matter how weird it is, this radio's already got a preset for it. See the ones that are off at an angle? Those are the 140 degree for JR. JR helicopters use a offset 140 position, so the mixing is a little bit different. A lot of radios handle this a lot of different ways by adjusting your percentage of mix and whatnot. This radio already has a template there for it. Anyway, let's choose one of those. So when we program this in, this is kind of a standard 3-servo CCPM mix. This is going to set up all of the mixes that are required to make that all work. So it's going to tell you what channels to plug it all into, then you'll be able to control the directions and whatnot to make sure everything works the right way. When you're in helicopter mode, probably the most important thing for setup for CCPM most certainly is all on this screen. There's all of this stuff that you don't see when you're doing an airplane. And what all these little extra doodads do for you airplane guys is mostly what it does is compensating for a couple of things. One, servos that all don't move at exactly the same rate or exactly the same distance or speed. And two, a lot of helicopter designs are not perfect. There are errors in the geometry of the CCPM swash plate movement. So even if everything was working perfectly, the swash wouldn't move up and down perfectly. What that equates to is if you want to climb and you push that collective up, the helicopter takes off this way or goes off over here because as you move through the stick, it didn't pull the same. So effectively, it gave it left aileron or something. You can adjust all of that out with this menu, where everything moves smoothly and the right way. I got to tell you the truth, I don't fly a lot of helicopters. I may have to poke around in here a little bit. Yeah, here we go. We have up to 3 gyro settings in up to every flight mode, which is 5. So you technically, if you wanted, could have 15 different gyro settings. A lot of guys don't use that, but most guys use 2. But we found there's a lot of fun times when having 3 is a lot of fun. So for example, one of our guys flies a T-Rex 250, and when he's inverted and flying backwards at high rates of speed, he needs full gyro. It needs to be the gain turned up all the way, otherwise the tail starts wagging on him. He can do that. He throws a switch, gets that extra movement, but the rest of the time he leaves it off. We have the same thing for governor. You can adjust your governor settings, and you have up to 3 to choose from that you can flip on and off. And you can either have them be the same for all the flight modes, or you can actually have them be different. So no matter what oddball thing you've decided to do next, the radio will adjust for it. And what's interesting about that is a couple of Japanese helicopter pilots thought the idea of 3 was better than 2. And once our guys got a hold of it, at first they said, Mike, why are you bothering with that? And then they used it once, and now they can't get away from it. Because one of the things this radio does is makes you think about what's possible, which isn't necessarily the same as just what you think you need today. It gives you new options you didn't know were there, without having to spend $2,000 on a new radio. You can mix out bad things like interaction between throttle and other movements. That's done there. And you still have all 5 C mixes. So you got some weird thing going on you need to compensate for, you can do it here. Some of the scale helicopter guys have moved stuff around in their helicopters, and they don't really geometrically work right anymore, and they've got to compensate and move some of that stuff out. The C mix is where they do it. I could go into a lot more depth, but I'm just going to leave it at this because, quite frankly, I'm not the helicopter expert. I like to be honest. This is the stuff that our helicopter pilots were all excited about when we started developing the radio. The interesting thing about the SD-10G, it was actually developed by Sanwa's top radio programmer, but it was in conjunction with 3 different Japanese sponsored pilots from Sanwa, and by 6 pilots here, 2 glider guys, a pattern guy, well, really 3 glider guys, and a pattern guy, 2 general flyers, me and Jack Albrecht, and by one of our helicopter pilots, Terry Moore. And I actually went to Japan with a list of what features to put in the radio to present to their engineer, and that was developed from those pilots. Once they went through it, they came to Toledo, because it was about a month later, and they met with almost all those pilots and some other ones, because the Toledo Week Signals Club has pilots in a lot of different categories, very active. And they actually interviewed about 12 different pilots over the course of the weekend. And the functions that are in this radio were developed from those meetings. Most Japanese companies say, here's the radio, like it. Our engineers said, we'd like to make a radio that you would like, so tell us what you want in it. And that's where this radio came from. I could spend about 2 hours talking about all the features, and I know nobody wants to hear it. For those of you who are hardcore glider pilots, and I know there's some of you out there, I'm not the guy to ask. Team USA F3B pilots are here. If you have a question about programming a glider, ask them. As many of my pilots have said, Cody Remington and Skip Miller and Dale Perkins, who helped design the radio, there's a lot of glider in this radio. And frankly, if I talk about it, I'm not going to do it justice. So I hope if you have glider questions, you ask these guys. I did want to go over a couple of other radios in the line. Nice. The SD6G is a 6-channel version of the SD10. This is a newer generation sport radio. If you don't have $400 to spend on an SD10G, this radio is less than $200. Has a lot of the same basic functions. There's 3 flight modes, a 5-point throttle curve, a same template system idea. If you get a chance and you're in the market for a 6-channel, take a look at it over in the booth. Mark can walk you through it. But I wanted to show you the menu. If you remember what we were looking at over here, this menu is very similar, like it has the type, and you can go in there and Now you're going to have to look at the manual to see what these abbreviations are. The SD10G's got a drawing in there for you. But it does quite a few 3-servo and a couple of 4-servo setups if you're flying helicopters. If you're flying airplanes, and it does have 3 flight modes of both airplane and helicopter. Again, you can go in and you tell your plane what kind of wing you have, what kind of tail you have, V-tail or 2 elevator servos, for example. So let's do that. And how many aileron servos you have. So let's say you have 2 individual aileron servos. It now tells you. In helicopter mode, this radio has swash plate leveling. You can control the BIXs. It's not as advanced as the 10-channel, but you can absolutely dial out weirdness. If the swash plate is not moving exactly evenly, because you've got a servo that doesn't move exactly the same or a geometry problem, this radio will dial it out. It does have expo on all 3 axes as well. A lot of people ask about that. It does have a throttle curve, a 5-point throttle curve. If you guys, those of you who fly gas as compared to glow, as compared to electric, you know that out of the box, none of those curves really work exactly right. Glow is probably the closest, honestly. Some of them are real on and off switches. Some of them don't work right in certain parts of the movement. So you don't get a real linear throttle feel when you move that stick. You can adjust all that out with this radio. And remember, we told it we had 2 aileron servos, so aileron differential is available to you, and flaperon is available to you. And because flaperon is available to you, flap elevator mixing is already set up there for you as well. And remember, dual elevator. Now, if you've got one elevator moving slightly different than the other one, you can turn one down or turn one up a little bit until they work exactly the same. Because we have dual elevator, we do have ailevator. If you want your tailerons to work like ailerons and work on the independent sticks, this radio will do that. It's for all you jet guys. And it does have some programmable mixes. So if you want to, oh, and it works with 6 cells, not 8, so it's a little cheaper for the battery. So if you have any questions or interest in a 6-channel, I'd highly recommend this one. Now, you'll notice that the radios don't look exactly the same. This is our 1st generation 2.4 radio. Frankly speaking, the radio itself is a little older technology because we took an old radio and made it 2.4. That's why this one doesn't look the same. But you got to start somewhere, and this was the most capable radio we had at the time that was reasonably priced. A lot of people still use this radio. It does a lot. Basic helicopters, basic airplanes, even some basic glider stuff. The one last thing I'm going to end with, a lot of people want to buy a radio because they want to make sure it has receivers they like. We have 3-gram Park Flyer receivers, 5-gram Park Flyer receivers, all the way up to FHSS3 has 2.5 miles of range. So regardless of what you need, Airtronics has a receiver that'll do the job. And when you compare those receivers to our competition, you'll find them very fairly priced. So if you have questions about the receivers, they have a full set over there on display. And and then they're still compatible with other brands of servos. So you are locked into the receivers, but we have a lot of them to choose from, but you can use all the servos you already have, generally speaking. So whether you need a 6 or an 8 or even a Sport 5, Sanwa now offers it. Airtronics has a full line of 2.4.